All right, welcome to the Red Alert Podcast, Trade Deadline Edition. I'm with my co-host Cindy Berry, and obviously we're gonna do a short little podcast, and we're gonna put it on YouTube too. So if you can't listen to it on the Apple or the Spotify or wherever the hell you get your podcast, you can go to YouTube and you can watch it there. Make it a little bit nice. But Cindy, Steve Yzerman
Yeah.
spoke. Obviously was it was a little bit what fans didn't expect with the trade deadline. They thought they were gonna maybe stand pat or something along that lines. But Steve Yzerman right off the hop said, "Listen, if I would, and there was no way in hell that I was going to be buying at all." And he said,
Right.
if the team would have been a Stanley Cup contender, he would have probably made a different choice in the way he went about it. But since they're not, there's no reason to keep it. And if you look at the Eastern Conference, especially in the Atlantic Division, I think it was a great move because I don't think you're gonna be a team that's gonna even come close to the beating a Boston, beating a Tampa Bay if you got in the playoffs, beating a Toronto. Obviously, you wouldn't play them in the first round, but you'd probably have to go up against Boston, and that's not an easy way to go about it. And if obviously he said he saw in that the Ottawa two games that like they just weren't ready to be a playoff team, so it was probably better to get something for Tyler Bertuzzi and some of the unrestricted free agents that they got.
Well, I think what he saw was that the group he had together of those UFAs that he had on there, they weren't really difference makers. Okay. It wasn't going to make a difference. Would they have maybe been less embarrassing? Will they be less embarrassing with those guys than they would have been without them? Maybe. But the point is they were going to have to go into the playoffs, and he didn't feel as if this group, after seeing what happened in Ottawa, that kind of confirmed what his intuitions were, because he's been watching these guys since training camp. Okay, so he's been watching them for months and probably years. So he was looking for certain things, and what he saw made him think that he needed to go in this direction. I suspected that he would. It was so funny because on our last podcast, right, things were even happening like literally as soon as we were done. Then you had the I think it was the Hronek trade dropped, and so one of the things that we said in that podcast, for those who listened will remember, I had said, you're talking about moving some roster players. Yeah, I think there's a couple anticipated moves, but what you're going to see is you're going to see Steve Yzerman move some guys that haven't been talked about. Nobody thought in a million years Hronek was going to be on the move. Nobody mentioned Sundqvist. I mean, nobody talked about that. And I suspected that was going to be the case. And I think you did too, Joe. We knew that when Steve Yzerman saw certain things, when he made this decision, and he even said at his press conference, he actually made this decision a while ago. But when they went on that little bit of a win streak, he thought maybe we'll just hold off for just a minute longer to see if it's going to go anywhere. And when it kind of went, it backslid a little bit, he's like, all right, we're going to go back to the original plan that was already set in motion. And that is to get something out of his UFAs.
Yeah, here's the thing. There was one guy that I can credit that he actually did put him as a guy who I would look to get traded, and I think he's a guy from. I'm trying to figure out the name. Sean Shapiro, I think it was. He works for Woodward Sports, I think it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Okay.
Because Darren's close to him. Obviously he knows his hockey. He's a Red Wings Woodward Sports guy, and he's probably the only person I respect in that whole thing, along with Darren and Neil. But I think that what you saw with Flip Hronek was, I don't know what the hell Vancouver is thinking. Um, I think it was just Stevie
Yeah.
Y. I think it was Stevie Y drugging another general manager, because if you look at the reality, uh, the Vancouver Canucks really do suck. Like, they are a bad hockey team. They should not be giving up draft picks at all. I mean, this is a team that has it, for you people that are pissed off that we traded Dylan Larkin. Not Dylan Larkin, Tyler Bertuzzi. Just think about if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan, okay? Your owner the owner of the Canucks has came out and says, I don't want to rebuild, I want to retool. Well, if you're in Detroit, you know exactly what that means. You're just gonna
That's
suck.
right.
You're gonna suck.
That's right.
You will suck for a long time just retooling, because you got to get bad in a hurry. And the funniest part about it is there's a guy coming out this year from a Vancouver, a BC kid, British Columbia kid, Connor Bedard, and they don't want to suck for Bedard. or what is it, crappy for Bedard or bad for Bedard? I don't know. All these
Right.
people, but you get my drift. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what the Vancouver Canucks are doing, trading a first round draft pick for Philip Hronek. I mean, I know he's a right hand shot, and God bless him. Like he played pretty well, but defensively, sometimes he loses his own ass in the defensive zone. He was better this year, but you got to think like having Oli Mata on his other side really helped him out a lot. So I look at it like this: great return for Philip Hronek. I thought that was absolutely phenomenal.
Hmm.
I thought the return for Tyler Bertuzzi being a rental is pretty damn good. Obviously, I don't like where he went to Boston because I can't stand Boston, but it whatever you had to do. You had to trade Bertuzzi. You had to trade some of the guys that you traded because they weren't going to be here. And Steve literally hit on that in his press conference, saying, listen, I traded guys that I either knew weren't going to be here or didn't fit into the long term plans of the club, and that's exactly what you did with Sundqvist, what you did with Bertuzzi. And to be honest, I've heard from people that Bertuzzi's agent drove a hard bargain and Stevie wasn't having it, and they really didn't have much talks after they had talks in the beginning of the season. So it really wasn't going nowhere, and it wasn't on the behalf of Eisman or Chris Illich or whatever you people want to blame it on.
Well, absolutely. And with I'll just make one comment about the Tyler Bertuzzi deal. And I know that some people are so upset. We posted on the Detroit Red Wings news, powered by IQ. We posted a picture that Boston put out of Tyler Bertuzzi, kind of that photoshopped with him with the spoke wheel and all that stuff, the spoke B, and it was just it's almost heart wrenching for those of us who know and love Tyler. I mean, he's a great guy. Don't get me wrong; he really is a good guy. But it hurt us to see him in that uniform. But at the same time, I agree with you 100%. The reality is this: people wanted to vilify Steve Yzerman, or they want to vilify Chris Illich and someone in the organization and the management, and they want to say that's their fault that Tyler Bertuzzi didn't stay a Red Wing. The only reason Tyler Bertuzzi's not a Red Wing is because Tyler Bertuzzi didn't demand it.
Yeah,
Okay. The agent's job is to go in and advocate for what his client wants. And his client obviously did not want to be a Red Wing more than some of the other things he wanted. He wanted other things more. And to his, hey, God bless him. Okay, I don't fault Tyler at all, but it was ultimately his decision. He is the man that makes that decision. So the fact that his agent, I've also heard the same thing. His agent is not the most palatable guy,
yeah.
but whatever. The reality is that he did what his client asked him to do. Maybe Tyler took bad advice. Maybe he's regretting it now. I don't know. I don't think any of us will know that. But Tyler Bertuzzi is not a Red Wing because he didn't want to be enough. That's why. Um, with regards to the overall trade environment or what happened with the Red Wings, where were the surprises and where were the expected moves? Here's where I think here are the things that did not shock me. Didn't shock me that he moved Tyler Bertuzzi. It's been talked on and off about, and um, it didn't surprise me he moved Tyler Bertuzzi once he saw the performance of his team over the last about week 10 days. It did not surprise me that he moved Jacob Vrana. I told you that. I know you were all excited he was going to come back. I knew it wouldn't last, and I knew it wasn't real because there's no way that a guy overcomes that kind of a personal struggle in 3 months and can come back and be a producer. It just wasn't going to work. He needs more time to heal. He needs more time to recover, and
I
maybe St. Louis can give him that.
listen.
Okay.
When I thought Verano would come back and maybe contribute, I didn't know half the things that went on behind the scenes. Um, I do know that Stevie, when he was asked about Verano, didn't seem pretty happy. So
Well,
it confirms the people that have told me what was said behind the scenes.
yes, me too. Me too. He's
Basically,
not done recovering.
no,
Period.
basically, Stevie's like, I wish him well in his hockey career and his personal life, and I'll
Yeah.
leave it at. He said I'll leave it at that, and I was like, whatever. That just tells you
Yeah.
what you heard is true. Um, The Bertuzzi trade I thought was going to happen no matter what, so I wasn't
Yep,
worried about
that didn't surprise me. You know what surprised me about it, Joe? Tell me if this surprised you. It shocked the hell out of me is where he went because nobody mentioned the Boston Bruins. I mean, even myself. I mean, you talked about the Hurricanes. I talked about maybe Toronto, and some of the other media, like the hockey writers, for example, they mentioned Winnipeg. They mentioned excuse me, Hurricanes, and I forgot the other team that they mentioned that he might go to. But the point is, nobody was talking about the Bruins. So I think that was a huge surprise. Wasn't a surprise he got traded. Huge surprise where he went. How about you?
Yeah, it was a surprise he went to the Boston Bruins. From my angle, but from the Boston Bruins angle, no, I think that I think they were in on Tyler Bertuzzi the whole time. To be honest, um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that Dan Sweeney has a pretty good relationship with Stevie Y, from what I hear. And I just feel like the Bruins. Listen, this is their last hoorah. I think. Well, not their last one, but Bergeron might retire, Krejci might retire, so they might have a little bit of uh, like a retool kind of thing going on with Boston after this year, which you got their first round pick next year, which is top 10 protected, which I doubt they will go in the top 10 of the draft. But it goes without saying, like the Bruins look at it like this: getting a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi, it's fine. Like we need that in the playoffs, especially when you go against Tampa or Toronto or whatever. We just want to be a big physical, skilled team, and that's going to help. For Bertuzzi, what's going to backfire on him? This is where it's going to backfire on Bertuzzi because I know he drove a hard bargain, and I think he thought more of himself than he really was. But the Bruins are slotting him in on the third line,
Yep.
so that tells you everything you need to know about what they think of him. They think he's a third liner. Obviously he was playing in the top line with Detroit, but like as I've said for about 20 freaking times. We don't have good wingers in Detroit. Like we just don't. And now Lucas Raymond looks like he's gonna become one of those guys who's gonna be a legitimate top six winger. But Tyler Bertuzzi was on this team when we had basically, I mean, we had Fabry playing top 6 minutes at one point. So
Right.
it really didn't matter.
Yeah, I agree. He fits their need right now, but I agree with you in terms of I think this is going to backfire on him because I'm not so sure he's got a long term future with that club or any other. I think he is at best a rental over there, and uh, he might want to consider some new representation, and he's going to have to maybe get realistic about some things. But we'll see where that lands. Jacob Verana did not surprise me. Where he went didn't really surprise me. I knew he was going to go somewhere. And it certainly I was certain that Steve wasn't going to keep him. And as Steve alluded to, you alluded to, I actually had an insight to a little bit of that background, and I knew, that I wish him the best. But it's very rare when someone first goes into recovery that it works the first time or the second time, especially when they have such challenges. So you wish it would, but it's a process, and I think that it's going to take a little while for Jacob Verana to get well and get better, and I and to recover, and I wish the best for him. Sunquist, uh, a bit of a surprise, only because a lot of people weren't talking about it. I kind of expected something like that. To tell you the truth, I thought it'd be Zadina or Valeno, but the reality is that they're younger guys who have been kind of brought up in the organization. I'll throw out some Canadian for you. In the organization, Sonny wasn't, and he was kind of just, I think, meant to fulfill a role that uh, they didn't get there this year. They didn't get there last year when he was on this roster as well. So he kind of fulfilled the purpose and no longer really has one in the long term goal. So it makes sense
I I
to
kind of
to let him go.
I kind of believed Sundqvist was going to get the belt. I think that he's a perfect playoff guy. Where he went to Minnesota, I don't know what they're doing with the things that they're doing in Minnesota. They're either rebuilding or they're retooling, and they're whatever. Doesn't make sense. Not a good plan. But yeah, I thought Sundqvist was going to leave Detroit. He's been an underwhelming kind of guy. You kind of expected a little bit more out of him. Hasn't been that good. I didn't expect Valeno or Zadina to get traded at all. I kind of figured they wouldn't, especially Valeno, because he's had a such high way that he kind of stepped up in his game. So, and Zadina, for what it's worth, the last couple games he's looked really really good. So, I'm impressed by that.
Well, they seem to be organization favorites anyway. For some reason, I see that every year in training camp. I see it, and I want to just hear it in some of the conversations I'm a part of. So they're kind of organization sweethearts, and they like them and whatever, and they see them as part of the long term. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, they're both really cute too. They're very they're just both really good looking, so they're eye candy for me. I'm cool with it. No, they do bring value to the organization, and I think they see that. And I think they see them as part of the long term organization because they've kind of grown up in it, and they see them as being really good fits already, and they don't want to disturb that. So, and then with Hronik, now that's the one that it surprised me, and it might really be surprising other people that they dealt Hronik because he was having such a good year. He was really having a good year. Here's the thing. That might have been the case, but I think the reason they dealt him, and I had a very strong suspicion they were going to deal a D-man, and I told you that, and I forgot to mention it on the podcast. I talked about it. I thought, oh, maybe Osterley. Oh, maybe when I knew they were going to deal a D-man when they signed Wallman, and I'm like, all right, so they signed him. And when Wally got that deal, I'm like, somebody's on the move. Somebody's
Well,
going.
I didn't think Osterley was going to get dealt because no one
Value
really,
there.
there's no value. Robert Hagg, same thing, no value there. It was going to be either Hronik or nobody, in my opinion. And Stevie Y found a big dumbass to take his garbage, and I think Philip
We got a
Hronik,
great return for him. We
he got
covered that. You're right. He got a
he
great
got a
return.
great return. He absolutely nailed it out of the park. And to be honest, I didn't think you could get a first round pick for Hronik. And I would have never said you would have got a first round pick in the first place. So hats off to Stevie Y for that. And the second part, so I think that I think he's really interested in bringing up a D-man from Grand Rapids. And a lot of people assumed that it would be like Simon Evanson, right? But Simon Evanson, when he was asked about Simon Evanson, he's like, it's not just Simon Evanson down there. There's a lot of D-men down there. Like he got defensive. So
Yeah, and he said the more I thought about it, he came up with like Jared McIsaac and Emil Vero, and I can tell you that they liked Emil Vero during training camp. I saw that firsthand, and so it didn't surprise me that he mentioned him. But yeah, you're right. He said they've got other D-men that they're looking at.
Sabrango, McIsaac, there's a lot of guys down there that are actually making some good headway, and I think they got a lot of D-men that they can eventually deal or whatever. But that's exactly how it's gonna go. Like the way that he was talking about, like it's not just Simon Evans, and I was like, holy crap! But he mentioned that we talked about Cross Hands before. He mentioned that Cross Hands was having a good year until he got injured. He was talking about Soderblom. I think this is going to give the opportunity for other guys to come up here and actually make where he can get people up here without keep him as a scratch or whatever.
Right. Well, that's exactly another advantage to him moving these UFAs and these other guys kind of out of the way now is because now with at least what he's got left of the season, he can bring up a lot of these guys and give them some more ice time, some more NHL ice time experience, and call them up from the Griffins or from one of their other minor leagues. They can bring them up and give them some NHL ice time, and it's kind of like no harm, no foul. You know what I mean? So they can really take advantage of that. We're talking about surprises out of this trade deadline day. One of the huge surprises for me, I got to tell you, across the board with these trades, even though I think Steve got some real good value, I was very surprised that he did not bring on any players, that he really didn't get, with the exception of that one minor league guy, whatever his name is. I know his name.
Well, he loaned him back to Springfield. So
and then he loaned him back. So really, what surprised me though is that Steve did not get any players for any of these guys. That was a surprise to me.
It felt like, from my understanding, there was a lot of teams that were unable to give up prospects because it would mess up their contract pool, because everything in the cap is so close together, basically from my understanding, like with the Bruins, like there was a guy that the Red Wings were trying to get instead of a first round pick, and they were like, well, if we do this, then you got to retain, we got to find a third team, and Steve Yzerman was like, nah, screw it, like I'll just take the first round pick. That's my understanding of it. Um, so that's why the cap has messed a lot of things up. So, trading a prospect, it could mess up their salary structure in some way. I'm not a capologist. I'm not going to pretend I'm a capologist, but that's just what I was hearing from people. And that Jeff Van Riemsdyk trade, from my understanding, there was a third
His
team.
name is it James Von. What? How do you pronounce his name?
Oh, it's
James
James Van Riemsdyk.
Van Reems. Yeah,
Yeah, they just call him JVR because it's.
I know.
But
I'm
anyways, like
glad.
in terms of that trade, was
Yeah.
hearing that like there was a third team involved, and the third team just completely was trying to change the trade up at the last moment, and they were like, "Screw it." Chuck Fletcher even admitted it. He's like, "Well, the Red Wings got another team that was involved, and there was gonna be conditionals, and there could have been a bigger trade. It seemed like, but that didn't happen." So I don't know. I think Steve Eisenman is gonna take these picks, and I think he's gonna put it into the thing. Obviously, this year the draft being a little bit deep, I think he's gonna use these picks. But I think if there is a deal that comes along where he can get a winger or he can get someone that can help the team next year, I think that's what he's going to do. Because if you heard in the press conference, he mentioned it where he said he'd rather have players than picks. And I thought that was a pretty big indictment of how hard it is to draft in the NHL because, that's how it is. But, you can't be drafting all these picks. Like, it won't. You got 50 contracts to put out, and there's a lot of young guys that are going to be getting contracts pretty soon. So I think that Stevie Y is going to try to move some of these picks. To be honest,
Well, I think so too, and I think he's positioning himself to allow for options. And he said that as much. He wants to have options. One of the things is he likes to get players because either you know what you have, or the prospect you think you know what you have because you've been able to watch him for a little while. But with the picks, you just don't know. It's really kind of a crapshoot. So I think he will trade away some of those picks and use them for leverage. To acquire known assets, known commodities. I think he absolutely will do that. Also, I think he has relieved himself of a lot of cap by releasing these UFAs also that where they weren't fitting or weren't going anywhere. Which if you look at, that kind of cap space that gives Steve, that gives him buying power also. So he's got, it's kind of like they say when you go in to buy a house, right? If you've got cash and you've got credit, you've got the world by the what. Same thing. Stevie Y is walking in not only with the cash, but he's also walking in with additional pieces of leverage in terms of those picks that he can go in and when the right opportunity comes along and he sees a great opportunity to fill one of those very important pieces in those slots, he's in a position to grab it.
yeah,
Whether it's a guy like JVR or whether it's perhaps a goaltender that he knows is a huge vulnerability there, that he knows he needs a backup goaltender, or perhaps it's picking up a winger, whatever the case is, the point is he's in a position to be able to do that. And again, I think that's a testament really to his savvy as a GM. And I trust the Yzerplan 100%. And I don't think anybody in the fan pool or in the media, I don't think there's anything to be critical about any of these moves that Steve made this week.
I think Darren McCarty said it best, and that's we know Darren, I know Darren. We're good. He's a friend of the program.
Yeah.
I think he said it best. The one thing you respect about what Yzerman did is he owns up to his mistakes. He doesn't, with Ken Holland would magnify him. He would keep the player because he wanted to prove a point that he knew what he was talking about. When in reality, like, you're not going to get everything right as a general manager. You're just not. I mean, there are certain general managers out there that they will literally suck their own hoo-ah to prove that they're right. And it
Right.
just doesn't happen that way. And you see with Brad Holmes and with the Lions, with there was mistakes that he made, and he just said, "Screw it, I'm cutting the player." Red Wings, same thing. Like he goes, I think he realizes really quickly if he made a mistake, and he tries to get rid of it. But obviously, when you're in the NHL, you can't just cut a player like you can in the NFL. But he's been able to get draft compensation. I really think that I really feel that he didn't think Hronik was a guy that he wanted to keep here long term. Uh, that's just my opinion. I think that like he feels like if you looked at the Ottawa game, like Hronik got absolutely lambasted by everyone on that ice those two games. I think he's seen that and he was like, I'm just gonna get rid of him while he has his term because that's the major thing. He has term on his contract,
Yeah.
and they basically said, I'm gonna trade him and I'm gonna trade Verana, and he held Verana out of last night's game. And listen, that's exactly what it is. Like he recognizes that he made a mistake with those two players, giving him a contract, and he said, I'm just gonna get something for him. In Verana's case, he didn't get anything for Verana. He just got like a seventh round pick. But he got rid of his mistake. It's another
Yep.
roster. It's another roster spot. Like he's
Yep.
got 50 contracts. I think he subtracted about like 5 or 6. So that opens up space for him to sign some players like maybe Carter Mazur to a contract in the off season after he's done with Denver, or maybe a Buchenikov, or maybe he's already signed Lombardi. So he can do a lot of things with it because he's got 50 contract slots to fill. So he obviously admitted his mistake and he said, "Let's go," and we're just gonna get on without it. And listen, he was right in the spectrum of saying like, I don't think we're a Stanley Cup contender because they're not a Stanley Cup contender. And if they would have kept the guys, if they would have kept Tyler Bertuzzi, they would have kept all the guys that they traded, and they missed the playoffs by probably like if they missed the playoffs by a point, what good does that do the franchise? I mean,
Right.
yeah.
What difference does it make if you miss it by 10 or you miss it by 1? Yeah.
Well, not only that, but like if you miss the playoffs by one, okay, cool. But like when you lose Bertuzzi for nothing, and
Right.
you could have got a first round pick for him, it would have been absolute disaster. Steve even said that he was weighing his options in the Ottawa series, and when he seen that, he basically said, "All right, it's time to make a decision, and I'm not doing it anymore." So good on him, and I think that the Red Wings are going to be better off in the future. They got the draft capital; they can go make moves. He's got a lot of flexibility of what he can do, and that's all you can ask because listen, they're still in a real rebuild stage. They're not out of the woods yet. They're getting out of the woods, but they're not there yet. I mean, you could watch this team and see that they're not there yet because if you watch them against Ottawa, they're just not there yet. Like they aren't. But they're significantly better than they were last year, and there's no doubt about that.
Yep. And I think Steve sees that. And I think that was like kind of his exact point is he realized that now he has to pivot at this point and position himself to be, to take advantage of the opportunities when they come about in the draft and in the off season, because he knows what he's looking at. He's seen it for many years and he knew he didn't have it. And so now it's time to cut the losses and make the most out of what you can. And that's what he did. And a huge credit to him. And I agree with you. He even said, if it goes bad, it's on me.
Yeah.
So, he's taking ownership of this. And that is a credit to him as well. And why people should be confident in the path going forward, because you have someone who is not only being responsible, but also being accountable. And that's what it doesn't surprise me. That's what a leader does. And you've got a good one. Let's go with it. I'm anxious to see kind of now what happens over the course of the off season. And I'm anxious to see, quite frankly, what guys he brings up. I think that's going to be really telling what guys he brings up to fill some of these slots.
Yeah.
That'll give you a good indication of who he's looking at. And then, of course, let's see how they perform here
Yeah.
on NHL ice. I think we've got still a lot of exciting things to look at from the Red Wings. We're just not looking in the same direction that we were looking in the beginning of the season.
Maybe they make a run because they got some teams that they're playing that are absolutely gutter trash. Maybe they get close and they just fizzle out at the end, which that'd be okay. I'm fine with that. But listen, I think the Red Wings are heading in the right direction. where it comes to the point is like, who is going to be your Braden Point? Who is going to be your Brad Marchand that you drafted after the first round? You know, Nikita Kucherov was a second round pick. Who's going to be the coach of the Red Wings? You know, it doesn't have to be in the first round. You know,
Right.
David Pastrnak, who just got an amazing deal, was a late first round pick, and he's been absolutely phenomenal. Jason Robertson was a second round pick, and that was another boneheaded draft that Kenny Holland had with I think he drafted Lindstrom over Jason Robertson, who's an absolute phenomenal player with the Dallas Stars. That's the guy. That's what has to happen. But I think we're seeing it not in the time that we thought we would see it, but I think we're seeing it with guys like Lombardi and Hannes, and I think you could look at Bochenikov and Carter Mazur. Like even Stevie said, like Carter Mazur is an excellent prospect, an excellent prospect. If you watch him at Denver, he is a real good player, and he's playing on one of the best teams in the country. So you're gonna see a lot of him on the ESPN with the Frozen Four because Denver is gonna be in the Frozen Four. There's two Red Wing prospects on that team, Shea Boom and Carter Mazur. And man, when you watch that team, like it was obvious Stevie Y was like, no, I want him to focus on school. No, I want him to focus on winning a national championship again because that team is really good. That's exactly what he's saying.
Yep. Yep. I agree with you. Well, Joe, I'm glad we got a chance to talk today because we covered a lot of ground, and we're going to go into more detail on some of these, the fallout, if you will, from this week and the trade deadline, and the looking in the future here to what the playoff picture looks like, whether or not, I mean, hey, the reality is the Wings aren't out of it. They could still pull off some sort of a miracle. You never know. Hey, maybe
Well,
moving these four guys is the right thing. Maybe he moves up some of these other ones that just catch fire. And wouldn't that be amazing to see? So
I would like
we'll
to
cover
see.
that next week.
I would like to see Berggren play with Larkin. I think that'd be absolutely phenomenal. And I think that what Derek Lalonde said about this being a 4-point game tomorrow against the New York Islanders, I think he's right. This is if you seriously want to have meaningful hockey down the stretch, you win tomorrow, you're setting yourself up for it because there's some teams that you're playing that you're gonna beat. You're gonna beat. I mean, Chicago is a total farce, but we're gonna see what's gonna happen. And I'm not ruling anything out because I think this team is better than people think.
And we will be talking about that next week on the Red Alert podcast that you can count on every week.
Yeah, and you know what? Guess what? Just
What's that?
Unlike Bertuzzi, will be in the lineup every week.
You bet. I'll see you then, buddy.
This is the Red Alert podcast on Between the Whistles. We will see you guys next week.
See you then.